Hello, I'm Dylan.
And I'm Kiyan.
And this is Trash Your Doctor, that podcast where we eat mud. Because this week we watched The Witchfinders.
Written by Joy Wilkinson.
Directed by Sally Apahamian.
And aired on November 25th, 2018. Yeah, Joy Wilkinson. Joy is sort of like a name you'd expect someone to have in this time period. You know, like just some, a virtue of some sort, or whatever.
Or whatever. Since when was joy a virtue?
Since now.
You can joyously murder people. I wouldn't call that very
makes
virtuous.
It right. What? Yeah.
We're going to have a long discussion about...
the Witchfinders.
Yes.
Here we are.
For some reason, that reminded me of someone on Twitter once was like, what was your favorite part of the Macra Terror?
Odd question. The one part I remember where they reveal the Macra.
Oh, I wrote that part where Ben and the Doctor gleefully commit genocide and kill all the Macra together. Don't forget about that. It was really more Ben, but the Doctor was the one talking in his ear, egging him on to do it.
I do remember that, actually. So, I mean, as usual, I didn't look up any production things for this. I don't even know if there's really any out there yet.
I don't think there was much, especially with Chris Chibnall's noticeable lid on the rumors that he keeps. Oh, that was the most convoluted way I could have worded that sentence.
Well, speaking of rumors, there's a recent rumor, since Series 12 is airing right now, there's a recent rumor that Yaz and Ryan are going to be leaving at the end of the season and that Graham is going to be staying on. So that's the hottest rumor in the Doctor Who fandom right now. We'll have to see if that ends up being true.
Well, what we'll have to see is if we can try and not spoil for ourselves whether or not it's true, and then see if we can find out for ourselves.
Well, I didn't spoil the Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror episode last week, which is a big disappointment. There was really something missing from my weekend, not having that spoiled last week.
I didn't really get Orphan 55 spoiled for me either. So.
Yeah, for that one, I had like bits and pieces of out of context spoilers, making the episode sound like way funnier than it actually was. Or probably actually was. Maybe it will end up being that funny.
What's probably happened is that there's no big reveal that everybody wants to rush to Twitter to talk about, so no one gives a damn. And then that's why we only get spoiled for the big stuff, which is kind of worse than just being spoiled for every episode, because at least if you're spoiled for every episode, it's equal opportunity spoiling, You
get a big picture of like what's going on rather than just
these random fragments of out-of-context things. It'd be like if you knew nothing about Star Wars and I just said, Darth Vader's Luke's father, and you were like, what? What does that even mean? Are those even words? That's kind of what's going on right now.
I guess. Anyway, what's going on right now in this episode is that the episode starts with, the Doctor and Ryan and Yaz and Graham going to crappy Renaissance fair. They say this is in the 1500s, but it's probably 2015. Just some secluded part of England that never caught up with the rest of history. No.
This is the yeah. I mean, as soon as this started, I was like, kind of weird that we're starting right here. They've already landed and they're just wandering around. And then I looked, and this is the shortest episode of this whole season. It's only 46 minutes. So I was like, that's a little... They could have. What I'm saying is, they could have used another minute to flesh this out.
Not even to flesh it out, just
at the end.
Just literally tack another minute at the end of them maybe just discussing the events that they just went through.
They had a whole 4 minutes they theoretically could have used anywhere in the story to not to pad it out, but to explore it a little more.
Yeah, it was a little fast. Another weird thing is that all these people here are way too clean for Like what is this, the 1500s, or like when is this?
When was King James king? That's the question. I'm sure it was the 1500s.
I think it was maybe the
Maybe it was later.
16
Let's
mid
just
1600s.
Google James the First and see when he was king. Oops. James the First. Yeah, James. Okay. James the Sixth and James the First. Well, it must be the late 16th, early 17th century. That's the key here, because he ruled from he was alive from 1566 to 1625, but he was king from 1567.
Since he was one.
Until 1625, so...
Yeah, all his life. Yeah. So that sort of, I guess, era.
Probably somewhere right at the turn of the century, which is a weird phrase to use in this context, since it usually refers to the 18th to the 19th century. But
or just any recent, like 20th to 21st, 19th to 20th.
Yeah, that's true.
Usually implies some sort of big technological shift now.
Well, there is a big technological shift in witchcraft.
I guess. New witchcraft technology coming out every day.
WitchCon. This is WitchCon, as we find out.
Anyway, someone starts ringing a bell and starts yelling, "Bring out your dead!" No.
No, instead it's, "Let's go watch the witch die."
Yeah, because they're having a little celebration, and it turns out that this is all commemorating the killing of a witch that's about to go on.
Yeah, they do this every Sunday, I think they say, or every weekend.
Every time Becca accuses someone, which seems pretty often.
It seems to be every weekend, apparently. For 36 weeks, that's nearly a year.
So they go to this little lake / pond thing. Well, I say pond, but it's obviously deep enough to drown somebody in.
There's an old lady on a chair, and Becca explains the rules of the witch trial. If you drown, you're not a witch. And if you don't drown, we hang you because you're a witch.
Exactly.
So
Heads I win, tails you lose. Checkmate, Bilehurst Crag.
While they're running up to this, like, Graham just points out this random obscure hill, and he's like, "Hey, I know that hill." And I'm like, "What?
It's Pendle Hill.
What?"
It's where that prison tree is keeping the aliens hostage. You guys didn't know that? No.
I mean, I was like, how do you differentiate this hill from all the other hills in the hillside of England? What's making this hill so special that you recognize it, Graham?
That artificial tree that's keeping aliens prisoners atop the hill. That's how you know.
But I mean, Graham's been here like, what, 2, maybe 3 times if we're optimistic, and he's like, that hill, I'm going to remember that hill for the rest of my life. It was mind-blowing.
They do say that this is in the north of England, so maybe this is, Graham sort of knows the area. I don't know.
But there's not even a town here anymore, because Graham's like, this town doesn't exist in our time, so what's going on? Is that even more? I was like, why did you come to this random hill at some point in your life?
Yeah, never know. We don't really know too much about Graham's life. Maybe, we just don't know,
It's true. He might be a secret agent. He might also be like a serial killer, and now he's traveling with the doctor, and the police at Scotland Yard are just stumped because the killings just stopped for no discernible reason.
So you're saying he's a serial killer, like, up until this point in his life, like, not in the past, but he's still one.
Yeah, he could be.
I guess like, once a serial killer, always one. You don't get absolved just because you stop the killings.
Yeah, you can't really undo all the killings.
No. At least not yet. I don't know what that means, actually.
Well, so anyway, this old lady gets dunked.
Yeah.
And the doctor jumps into the lake. She's like, "I'm going to go save that old woman." Because right before this, the doctor told the gang not to interfere, but now she's changed her mind. And she gets the old woman out, and Yaz is like, "She's dead. Sorry."
Yeah, so they're a little too late. The woman's granddaughter, Willa Twiston, is obviously distraught about this.
Yeah. But the doctor pulls out her psychic paper, and she's Witchfinder General.
Right, so they sort of meet Becca I forget Becca's last name. Was it Twiston?
No.
No, it was something.
Something with an H. I'll look it up. Becca Savage, never mind.
Yeah, I'm a little little on the nose there with Becca Savage, but yeah, so they meet Becca. She's been, running this sort of witch hunt.
Right.
And she welcomes them in now that she thinks they're the Witchfinders.
And she quotes from the King James version of the Bible, and the doctor's like, "Did you read the New Testament?" Where he's all like, "Love thy neighbor." That's what King James would want. And then you just see the door get kicked in, and this guy strides in, and he pulls off his mask. We've been seeing this guy for the whole episode, actually kind of lurking in the shadows and behind the trees. But he pulls off his mask, and it's like, "It is I, King James.
It's me, a.k.a. a Shilder."
That would have been a pretty legendary twist, actually.
No, it's King James. And I thought for sure, I would have bet money that there was going to be some twist where this wasn't actually King James. Because, like, what are the chances of the actual King James just, like, dressing up in a mask and, like, what looks to be like an armed robber outfit and just coming to this random town and just doing his thing?
Doesn't the doctor mention this at some point? She's like, "This is all too much of a coincidence."
Yeah, I thought it was going to end up being, like, some sort of weird staged thing done by aliens.
Maybe.
But it's not.
But it's not. It's the real King James with a really complex accent that I can't replicate.
Yeah.
This is Alan Cumming. If you didn't recognize him underneath his cunning disguise of facial hair. I actually looked up King James after this, and they actually did a pretty good job of not only casting, but replicating what King James seems to have looked like from his paintings.
Yeah, I mean, I looked up some stuff about him as well, just sort of skimmed some stuff about his life, and, they kind of, a lot of it is sort of incorporated into this character.
Yeah, when King James talks about being paranoid about how all his regents died, I actually vaguely remember learning about this in history in high school.
Wow.
But I completely forgot that was King James. So when you talked about that, I was like, oh yeah, that's King James.
Yeah, there's you kind of learn, even in America, you kind of learn about the most famous of the British monarchs.
So
but
King
they all
James
just,
and
yeah,
Queen Elizabeth
but they
and
all,
Queen Victoria.
They all just sort of except for Queen Victoria and the Victorian era.
Henry the Eighth.
They all just sort of blend together into this weird mass of this is something British royals at one point did.
I mean, but I'm sure that the English people would say the same thing about every U.S. president.
Probably, yeah.
Like the pre-Bush era.
Yeah, probably. I once heard a British guy talking about the American politics, but way in the past, and he was like, everyone knows that George Washington and Abraham Lincoln were the first two presidents, but did you know? And I just didn't have the heart to tell him that wasn't the case. Well, I would assume most British people know that Abraham Lincoln was not the second president.
He was the 16th.
No, I didn't even know that. I just knew he was somewhere down the line.
I don't actually think he was the 16th.
Okay. He's probably around that. He was probably in that realm.
He was in the realm of 16.
Yeah.
He was in the realm of 16. Kind of wild to think about that we've only had 40.
Yeah, it is.
Presidents?
It is actually really weird to think about that. There's not been that many.
Anyway, when King James comes in, the doctor's like, "I'm the Witchfinder General," and she pulls out the psychic paper again. He's like, "This says Witchfinder General's assistant." And she's like, "What?" And then King James is like, "So, Graham, you must be the Witchfinder General then." The doctor's like, "Ugh."
Yeah, this is the first of a few instances in this episode where the doctor sort of realizes that being a woman is now kind of working against her.
Mm-hmm. At least in this era.
Yeah.
It would be kind of really interesting if they explored this a little further with an episode maybe set in some other culture, maybe in the future where the men, in a matriarchal society, I should say, where men are subjugated, and the doctor leverages her power to save the day. I don't know. Just as kind of a mirror to this episode. Could be interesting.
This is also one of the, I think, few instances in this era, this season of Doctor Who, where we kind of get that the psychic paper It doesn't just show you like whatever the doctor wants. It shows you whatever you want.
It shows you kind of whatever's convenient to save the day, really. if we get down to the nitty gritty.
Yeah, but it's not all powerful. King James can't accept that the doctor is the general, so he just sort of doesn't see that. And Graham wears the hat for the rest of the episode. So
yeah, he gets given the Witchfinder General's hat, and then King James is like, my previous Witchfinder General betrayed me, so I had him shot.
Graham's like, oh.
Graham's like poking a hole through the bullet wound that's still in the hat. I hope they washed the hat since he shot the guy, or else it's like just brain matter. King James seems to have something for Ryan.
Yeah, King James was known for, having a lot of male lovers. Behind closed.
I didn't know that until watching this episode. I was like, huh, that's interesting. Let me Google that. And I Googled it and I was like, huh, it's right.
Yeah. Sort of like behind closed doors in the era.
Right.
I mean, what I found was that like the quote unquote, all that we can come to as a general consensus is that like people nowadays say like, well, we don't know like whether or not he was gay, but he took a lot of, male companions. And like, that's just pretty much like, he was like, yeah, he was gay. Like just back then, if you just were to come out and say that, you would like not be king anymore, or like be totally, disregarded, or just, I don't know, wouldn't be good to come out with that in the 1500s. I think nowadays we can look back and say, yeah, he was gay.
That's like James Buchanan. A lot of historians now have like looked at his letters to this guy, I guess, and have been like, yeah, he was probably, if not gay, he at least had a thing for this guy.
Yeah.
Although again, like if he had just come out as president and been like, I'm gay, they would have been like, sorry, I don't know if he'd be president anymore.
Probably, yeah.
Although they would have had to go through like a 10-year process to impeach him. And, looking back, that might have united the North and the South and prevented the Civil War. This is a strange timeline where the North and the South unite to impeach James Buchanan and avoid the Civil War. At least for a couple years.
I forget if it's Becca or King James, but someone comes out and says like, we're gonna get rid of Satan's influence in this town, even if it means killing everyone.
Becca. It's Becca.
James is on board with killing everyone, though. He's like, yeah, I gotta stamp out Satan.
Yaz goes to talk to what's her name? Willow. And they get attacked by mud monsters.
Yeah, well, okay, let's not gloss over the fact that, like, Yaz stumbles upon Willa, like, doing this witch-like satanic chant at her grandmother's grave.
Yeah, and then Yaz jumps to the conclusion that Willa is actually a witch because the mud people rise and well,
the mud vine at this point.
That's true, the mud vine.
The vines from Troll 3.
There's a really, really funny line here that I thought was just hilarious because the doctor decides to break into like King James's room to find out more.
Rebecca's room.
Rebecca's room, sorry. And the doctor says the doctor says something about like, I'm just gonna go in here and see what's going on. And Graham goes, to be fair to King James, you are really snooping, because King James says some like sexist things previously about how it's really smart that the Witchfinder General has an assistant who's a woman who can like infiltrate the ranks of women and snoop and find out what's going on. So she's snooping around and Graham's like, to be fair to King James, you are snooping right now. And she fires back, I'm investigating. And Graham's like, Well,
they find a lot of interesting stuff in Willa's room. They find an axe by her bedside, and they find some like medicine jars or something.
Yeah. So
and then I think the doctor reconvenes with Yaz.
Yeah, Yaz runs in and is like, oh my god, Willa was doing some sort of strange satanic ritual over the grave, and then the mud people arose, and the doctor's like, it's probably not witchcraft, though. And Yaz is like, yes, it is. She was literally standing over the grave.
So they come up with a new plan. The doctor and Yaz go to talk to Willa, and Ryan and Graham do their best to stop Becca and James from killing anyone.
Right.
They find out, Yaz and the doctor, that is, find out that Becca is actually Willa's cousin and that she had her own grandmother put to death.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, she's stopping at nothing to get rid of these witches.
Yep. Yep.
There's a lot of sort of red herring-esque hints where, like, it's kind of implied, like, is Willa really a witch? Like, because her grandma was supposed to be like this medicine woman type thing, which is kind of, maybe in these days associated with like magic or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, then they kind of encounter the mud people, and James and Becca arrive at the most inopportune moment because they're like, Doctor, seems like you're controlling the mud people with that sonic screwdriver of yours. Your wand looks like we should probably arrest you. And she's like, no, I'm not a witch. And James is like,
that's just what a witch would say.
Yeah, that's exactly what a witch would say. And then they're like, so Willa, she's a witch, right, Willa? And the implication here is like, if you say no, we're gonna put you to death too, Willa. And Willa's like
pulling at her collar, like, yeah, I guess she's kind of weird.
Willa's like, it's kind of weird that she called herself the Doctor.
But there's actually, a little before this, there's sort of two kind of backstories we get. We actually get a little bit about Yaz, which is really nice considering how much she was kind of not a big part of the episode last week. We get sort of why she became a cop, which is that, in her, early years, whatever, as a young child, she was heavily bullied. Some kid in one of her classes as a child turned the rest of the class against her. She just had to put up with it.
Mm-hmm. We find out the bully's name was Izzy Flynn.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I didn't remember that, but
we actually
Izzy
find
Flynn.
out her name later on when the Doctor's in chains.
Or his, right? You can't. Izzy could have been a guy, right? Or a boy.
I guess.
Yeah, I don't know.
I've never met or seen a guy named Izzy.
Yeah. Well,
because I don't know.
Like Israel is like a male name at times.
Yeah,
so.
I guess. I always assume it's short for Isabella, which I guess a guy could be named Isabella too.
Yeah. I mean, names are just words.
It's true. Names are just words we assign meaning to. That's why I tell all my students to call me Death, Destroyer of Worlds.
So yeah, she was bullied by this guy, and that inspired her to become a cop to stamp out the bullies of the world. And this is all sort of really interesting, comes into play later on, when the sort of implication is that, like, the bullies or the leaders of the witch hunts of the world are just pointing the finger at others so that people don't point the finger at them and point out their own faults or whatever. So.
Mm-hmm. We also, before they get a scene that I want to point out, because somebody in the production crew buggered this up pretty badly, in my opinion. But the Doctor's holding a jar with some of the mud in, and then the mud starts to like go wild and jump around in the jar. And this is when she's like, "This isn't witchcraft. This is probably some alien technology." But the scene, she's holding the jar up to her face, and then she goes, "Whoa!" when the mud starts to move. Except, and I only noticed this on this watch through, but if you go back and watch that scene, the Doctor actually reacts before the mud does anything, and then the mud starts to move. So,
not a big deal.
Not a big deal, but it's like one of those things where you notice it and, like, I guess just reinforces that this is just a fictional piece of work that was assembled by a bunch of people instead of like a
instead of just like an alternate real universe behind the pane of your screen.
Yeah. Behind the black mirror.
We get a little more of James's backstory, actually. He tells it to Ryan. He sort of reveals that, like, his mother put his father to death and was then killed. Not put his father to death, killed his father, then was put to death herself, and she abandoned him when he was 1, and she died when he was 1, which is why he became king when he was 1, and he was raised by people who were probably just, trying to whisper into his ear and use him to boost their own power. So yeah, not a great life. First, Ryan is like, yeah, I feel you, man. Like, my mom died when I was young. So did my nan just died recently. And then James revealed, like, the the
All the assassination attempts people have carried out on him, and then Ryan's like, "Oh, you weren't kidding, were you?" And he's like, "No, why would I be kidding about that?"
But yeah, then they don't jail the doctor. They just kind of like tie her to a post.
It's true. And then James is like, "Explain how your wand works," and she's like, "If you give me that wand back, I'll answer all your questions." And he's like, "I'm no fool." And then the doctor basically hits him with this. I think this is the first like quote defining speech unquote of the 13th Doctor's era. You know, in the vein of like the Zygon invasion inversion. The good man goes to war kind of. This is the Doctor getting her moment speech, I guess.
I guess. And I forget exactly.
It's not played up as much as the other ones, but I only wrote down like one line from it that I thought was pretty good. But it goes on a bit about how like people aren't all good or all bad, and that people are more complex than that. Because she basically calls King James out for like wanting to stamp out Satan, and then she says this line: "We want certainty to know people are either all good or all evil, but that's not how people are."
Yeah.
Which I thought was a really nice line.
What kind of ties that all together is actually something she says before that. So interesting that it's kind of presented backwards like that. But she says at the beginning of this, of her dialogue here, she says something along the lines of, James says like, "I want to know like the secrets of the universe" or something. And she says like, "Well, it's not that easy. Like knowledge is something you have to like work towards," or something along those lines.
Yeah, knowledge isn't given, it's earned.
Yeah, which is kind of plays into like the people aren't black and white thing, because it's so easy to see it that way. Yet like when you actually get down to the more nuanced bits of all these things, and sort of interpreting the world and people around you, it's more complicated than that. You have to do a little more legwork of your own.
Yeah, and I mean it's nice that we've kind of seen the 13th Doctor playing into this the whole season. In like Rosa, when was it Trasco wants to basically pervert the course of human history, as the Sontarans once did.
Trasco in the legacy of the Sontarans.
She doesn't like want to kill him. Like she's actually pretty upset when Ryan sends him way back into the past. She's like you didn't have the right to do that, Ryan. Or like last week when Charlie was going to send those bombs out to kill everyone, like even at the end she's like, "Charlie, come on, just come back up here and we can save you, like it's okay." And he dies, obviously, but
yeah.
And even like in Demons of the Punjab, she's trying to save Manesh. Like this whole season, the Doctor's been like pretty much on the side of like not condemning anyone, except for Tim Shaw, not condemning anyone for their evil actions and being like, "Well, like you're doing all these evil things, but that doesn't mean that I should like kill you or something."
Yeah, and we can even think back to Astos, the greatest character of this season, where she did like heavily label him to begin with, and that was like one of the few times that she is the 13th Doctor, and just the Doctor overall has like admitted that they were wrong.
Right. The 13th Doctor, I think, is definitely more vulnerable, emotionally vulnerable than other Doctors, by which I mean she's more willing to admit that she's wrong than the other Doctors have been. At least so far.
I guess.
She might harden up. She might be like, by the end of her run, she might not be doing that anymore. We don't know.
I don't know. I mean, kind of thinking back to the 12th Doctor, he seemed a little emotionally fragile.
I mean, that's true. I mean, he was especially emotionally fragile when Clara left.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, think back to the 10th Doctor in his very first episode, and he's like,
no second chances.
Yeah.
Yeah, the 10th and 11th Doctors were like the least like emotionally driven Doctors, it seemed.
I think the 11th Doctor was motivated by emotion. I just think he was more motivated by like anger than any other emotion.
Yeah, I guess so. 7th Doctor was at times, at times seemed to feel no emotion.
Yeah, I think the 7th Doctor was the most emotionally closed off of all the Doctors. Except maybe the first Doctor, though by the end of the first Doctor's run, he was pretty open with everyone. I think we mentioned this on the show back then, in one of our earliest moments of actually analyzing characters. Anyway, they decide to dunk the Doctor because James is like, "I won't fall for your witchy tricks." So they dunk her, And then Graham, Ryan, and Yaz, I don't even know what they were doing at this point, but they're just wandering through the forest and they hear all the bells for the witch dunk, and they're like, wait, what?
They were following someone, I forget who. They were tailing the mud creatures.
Ah, yes. The mud creatures.
Who were, like, going to infiltrate. They were going to Becca's house, I guess, just to, like, they just get, what do they do at Becca's house? They just get the axe, don't they? Like, that's all they do. They're just there for the axe.
Yeah, this is kind of the Doctor's story this season, I think. Like, if we were to kind of look at all the stories and, like, you know, if Demons of the Punjab was a Yaz story and Rosa was kind of a Graham Ryan story with a little bit of Yaz, Saranga was kind of a nobody story. This is kind of the Doctor's story, and next week is kind of Graham's story, so...
Huh.
And Woman Who Fell to Earth was, you could say in many ways, Ryan's story.
Yeah, if it's I would classify that under Ryan.
So they dunk the Doctor, and the gang is pleading with James to get her back up, and he's like, all right, it's been long enough, and Becca's like, no, it hasn't. No, it hasn't. We see kind of while Becca, she accidentally touches the dunking log, and it shocks her, and the Doctor's like, what are you hiding, Becca? What's the medicine for, Becca?
Yeah, and Becca starts sort of crying.
Black.
Yeah, turns out she's just leaking like mud because she's
smearing her eyeliner.
They bring up the dunking apparatus, and the Doctor's not on it whatsoever.
Yeah.
She just kind of swims out of the lake.
And it's like, surprise. He's really good at holding her breath, which is true. I mean... Throwback to that time, I think the third or fourth Doctor was just airlocked, and they just held their breath for like 2 minutes in the vacuum of space. And they're like, yeah, we Time Lords can do that. Back when Bob Holmes would just introduce things about the Doctor that was convenient to him. Throwback to that time that like Russell T tried to retcon the Doctor into having like 500 regenerations and just nobody bought it.
So the Mud People arrive, and they're ready to serve Becca.
They bow down to Becca, and she's like, "No, I'm sorry. I tried to keep Satan at bay." And James is like, "You were the witch all along. You brought Satan to this village."
Yeah, in a moment of like, you know, great acting, I think this episode really falls apart. You know, if Becca isn't done well, which she is, so it doesn't.
Wow. Wow.
But yeah, she's like, yes, I'm the witch. Like, it was me all along. And the you know she sort of turned, she sort of not reanimated, but she's sort of I guess taken over by the mud beings.
Yeah, because the Doctor says back. This is a throwback to when the Doctor first discovers the Mud People for herself. She says that, you know, they didn't want to kill, they wanted to fill. In that line.
Yeah, there's a lot of, now that you bring that up, there's a lot of like sketchy wordplay in this episode, and not like in a good, you know, sort of nuanced, punny way, but just in sort of like a, you know, rhymey alliteration, like here it is, haha, and they even mention it.
Hey man, they didn't want to kill, they wanted to fill.
I think right after either that, yeah, it was either right after that line or right after another rhyming line where the Doctor's like, guess it was a poet and I didn't really know it. Haha. She doesn't actually say that, but she says something along those lines.
She says, wow, look at my wordplay or something. I think it's after the kill, not fill line. She goes, wow, look at my wordplay.
And it's like, yeah, there's something to be said about incorporating sort of, you know, maybe dialogue that sounds better written than spoken in the episode. Sure, there's something to be said for that. But then there's also something less nice to be said for pointing it out, too. But whatever, we don't need to dwell on that. We find out that these mud creatures are the Morax.
Well, Becca, right before she dies, reveals that she cut down a tree because the Doctor's like, what did you do, Becca? She's like, I cut down a tree.
It's just such like a not, like the way she explains it is such like a non sequitur. She's like, well, you see, there's a tree on Pendle Hill that was blocking my view, so I chopped it down. You're like, okay, where's all this going?
That's it. That's where it goes. She chopped the tree down, and while she was chopping it down, the roots attacked the tree. She also reveals that Willa's grandmother, her grandmother, she brought her in because she needed medicine, and she tried everything, And then because she knew about the Satan within her, the devil within her.
Yeah, so the mud beneath the tree invaded her body, and her grandmother refused to amputate her arm or whatever.
Yeah, right. Or her leg.
Yeah, whatever it was. Yeah, it was her leg, actually.
So they knock them all out and make off with King James because they're going to fill King James with their king.
Who's still trapped in, like, the stump of the tree.
The Doctor realizes the tree was, like, some sort of ancient techno-lock.
Yeah.
And so she takes the dunking chair, which was made of the tree, and crafts torches out of it, which the smoke from the fire of burning the technology will ward off the Morax, I guess.
Yeah, burns green. And I have to say, like, this is, 3 or 4 minutes before the end of the episode that they're doing all of this. This is such a nice throwback to the classic era where they just, like, the thing would be solved in the last minute.
Where the 120 minutes that come before that are like completely worthless because you only care about the final 2 minutes of the story when everything gets resolved. I don't know why I think of Castrovalva when I think of that, but I do when like Nyssa and Tegan carry the Doctor just in the chamber all the way up to Castrovalva, and then they just dick around Castrovalva for 2 episodes, and at the very end, the Master's like, haha, I'm trapping you in Castrovalva, and the Doctor's like, no, you're not, I'm collapsing Castrovalva on you, and they leave, and it's like, so what was the point?
At least Castrovalva presented an interesting society. Other episodes didn't necessarily.
Like Time Flight. I'm noticing I remember the 4th and 5th Doctor's eras much better than I do the 3rd, 6th, 7th, and 2nd. And to an extent, the 1st.
2nd, I think, is the biggest blur for me. Like,
I think the 2nd is the most missing, so there's a lot of reconstructions.
Probably, yeah.
The 3rd Doctor, I just remember someone getting eaten by a couch.
I don't remember that at all.
It's in the Master's very first story where he teams up with the Autons.
Oh.
Where they brought back those classic villains, the Autons, from exactly 1 year before when they were introduced.
So, this is actually funny. So they're planning on doing their raid on Pendle Hill. And Willa shows up and she's like, you need me to guide you up the hill. And you're like, really? Like,
really?
Just a hill, like, just walk up, like. But it was nice that Willow was involved in the sort of climax of all of this. They just go and they do it. They do their job.
Yep.
And it works. The Morax are defeated.
Yeah, the Doctor just slams the torch or the sonic screwdriver into the tree and it reactivates the prison. And then King James just goes, burn the witch. He literally goes, burn the witch, and then runs up and lights Becca on fire with the fire from the torch, and she just burns away and dies. And the Doctor's like, you really didn't have to do that.
You really didn't listen to anything I told you, did you?
Yeah, you were not listening at all.
It's okay, James. I'm proud of you for stamping out Satan. Someone's got to do it. Just kidding.
Someone must take this burden upon themselves.
That is the way he sees it. That's something I'm liking about this season is it has the stuff with the Doctors like, yeah, people aren't black and white. It's more of a gray area, and that's actually presented. It's not just, her rhetoric. It's actually like, all right, most of the villains this season are just doing what they think is right, and we can understand that in some weird way, even if we don't agree with it.
Even if they're raging space Nazis who want to turn the world into a racist hellscape.
Where is that?
That's what what's his name wanted to do in Rosa. That's why he was stopping Rosa from getting on the bus.
Yeah.
Because he was a space Nazi.
Well, I didn't see him. He was more of a time Nazi.
Oh, I mean, what's the difference? What's the difference?
I don't know.
From a physics point of view, what's the difference?
I don't know, but he was from Earth, right? That was the thing. So when you say space, I think like alien, like not from this world.
I mean, it wasn't, but I mean...
Yeah, I guess like...
Was he from Earth or was he just human? Because the humans have like expanded to other planets, so...
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I guess like if you go like thousands of years into the future, maybe things are so different that we don't even consider it Earth and our society anymore.
I wonder if there's like the humans born on Earth 3 million years in the future will have some sort of elitist complex over humans born on other planets and be like, well, I was born on the original planet.
Maybe, yeah, I don't know.
Anyway, yeah, and then it just kind of just ends because the Doctor takes James into the forest, and James is like, I know she's still mad at me, but how can I make her not mad at me? And the Doctor's like, I won't be not mad at you.
Yeah, she doesn't even talk. She's like, we get the bit of info that she's like refusing to talk to him.
She says one thing to him, which is kind of a, ooh, snap line, because they go and then it's just the blue box, you know, the TARDIS is there, and James is like, well, what's this? And the Doctor goes, just another mystery of life you'll never understand, James. And he's like, oh.
Rim shot? No.
Oh. He asks Ryan to come with him, and Ryan's like, nope.
Yeah, the look on Yaz and Graham's face when he asks that, like, seems to indicate that they're like, yeah, do it, Ryan. Like,
yeah, I did notice that, actually.
Like, this could be the opportunity of a lifetime, Ryan.
That'd be so weird if that was how Ryan left, though.
Yeah, it would. Well, that would actually be a throwback to, like, all the times that, like, the early companions were just married off, like, in such a strange way, especially like Leela, which is like you never would imagine that Leela would stay on Gallifrey and be married off as her right out.
Ryan wouldn't even be getting married off. No one would even, like, in the society, no one would even really be allowed to know.
He would just be this sort of like weird consort, but like it would be just kind of a throwback to that in a way, I think.
And you are right, Leela's write-out was the most out of nowhere because she wasn't even from Gallifrey or had any... She didn't have any connection to Gallifrey, like, at all. She just got dumped there.
There for like a couple hours.
She's there for a couple hours. She's like, this is where I want to make my forever home, with the warrior tribe in the wilderness, in the nuclear wasteland of Gallifrey. Goodbye, Doctor.
Yeah. But that's not to say the other ones weren't weird. The only one that I can kind of say was all right was Susan, and that was more just like how it was done, not like what it actually was.
Well, because Susan was the first, so we didn't know it was the first of a long-running tradition of them getting married off.
She was also like one of the only ones, this barely makes it better, but I think it does, one of the only ones who had like a mini romance scene with the love interest, quote unquote. Also the only one to actually get a goodbye from anyone, the Doctor or the companions. The other ones were just like, all right, later. Like,
well,
see
like
ya.
most of the reboot ones get goodbyes, except for Donna.
Yeah, well, hers is like, I think, doing something totally different.
I was just saying, I wonder if all of them getting married off was like an oblique throwback to the whole Shakespeare thing where like comedies end in marriage and tragedies end in death. And they like didn't want these companions to like end in tragedy, so they married them off. I don't know.
I think it was just like, how do we write out this female companion? Like, what's a good thing for a woman to do to stop traveling with the Doctor? Oh, get married. I think it's more that than anything, really. But, you know, whatever. I guess there's multiple ways you can kind of view it.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think it's just honestly the sexism of the time in a way.
I mean, definitely that is definitely a major part of it. I'm just thinking like maybe one of them was like the writer going, maybe I don't want this to end in tragedy, so I'll marry them off. But probably not, because we never saw any of the male companions get married off, so sexism. Although Steven does end up marrying on that planet he gets dumped off on, if you consider the audios to be canon.
I mean, his write-out is that he like becomes king of a world, so...
That's true. Turlough's write-out is that he just goes home.
Yeah. What if
and Adji just gets killed.
What if Turlough like went home and they're like, haha, gotcha, and he's like jailed right then and there?
That'd be hilarious, actually.
For us, for him, it would suck.
That's true. That's you right. That actually would suck. Not as much as Adric, though, who just dies at his right out. So I mean, Turlough could always hold on to that.
At least I'm not Adric.
Yeah, not even the fact that he's dead, but at least I'm not Adric.
Anyway, the episode just ends.
Yeah, and then the preview for next week like doesn't tell you anything about the story except that it's set in Norway.
Well, yeah, as usual now, I didn't actually watch the preview.
The previews are also like after the credits, at least in the way I'm watching them. So,
Yeah, I think so.
but yeah, the preview is literally just the doctor going, "There's a cabin in the woods in Norway with a fireplace with no smoke." Cut to random scene of the doctor screaming. Cut to random scene of Graham being like, "Oh no!" Cut to end.
Well, I'm just excited to finally find out what the heck this frog is all about. I've been waiting for over a year now, and it's almost time.
Are you prepared to ribbit your way to freedom?
I guess. I'm probably going to watch the episode today because
That's
of this.
how excited you are?
Yeah, I actually am.
Trust your ribbit.
Trust your
Frogtor
Frogtor.
Who.
So I don't know if you had anything you wanted to talk about for this one, but I had one little small thing.
I think I talked about it with the not black and white thing. I think that was kind of the main thing I wanted to talk about, and then you kind of mentioned that it plays out in this episode too, where the doctor's like, James isn't all bad or all good,
Right.
but he needs to stop trying to stamp Satan out everywhere by
Yeah.
killing people.
Yeah.
Because the doctor like calls Becca out the whole episode, like, you've been killing people to save yourself. And then at the end, like when the mud people show up with the axe, the doctor's like, "Becca, come stand with me. I'll protect you from the axe."
Right.
Basically.
And that's, I mean, in a way, that's what the Morax themselves are doing, is that they're invading others to kind of, propagate themselves.
Mm-hmm. Like the coronavirus.
Yeah. But, sort of one thing I wanted to touch on here is that, like, when James shows up, Becca immediately knows who he is. And, would people at the time, like, really know what the king looks like? I don't know. I don't, like, and obviously that I don't think it ruins the episode for that not to be historically right. But I'm just curious if, like, in the actual historical past, would you have even known what the, king looked like? Or even, like, in the early days of the U.S., would you have even known what the president looks like?
That's true. I guess I have a couple things to say about that. One, I don't know if they would have known what he looked like, but I think maybe, in my opinion, what this episode was going for with that was to show that James was kind of like a celebrity almost.
Yeah, probably.
And
he did have to hide his face in the countryside,
Yeah.
so there is that.
and that he was kind of a big known person in this whole thing. Almost kind of this dark twist where, like, she's a big fan of his work because he stamps out Satan everywhere and he's hunting witches and stuff, and she's like a big fan of his work kind of thing.
Yeah.
But what I was going to say is that pretty sure that, like, most Americans didn't know what the president looked like until, like, photography was invented and allowed
Probably.
a much wider dispersion of the president's visage, I guess.
Yeah.
Just citing back to that example where JFK and I think it was JFK and Nixon had a debate, and then, like, people who listened on the radio thought that Nixon won, and people who watched it on TV thought that JFK won because everyone thought JFK was more handsome.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Sort of something interesting to think about, I guess.
I mean, it's like, how many people would have even known, like, what Lincoln looked like? Because even after photography was invented, a lot of presidents like Lincoln were very secluded and didn't go out in public a lot. There's only one photograph of Lincoln at Gettysburg, and it's him leaving the stage after giving the Gettysburg Address because the speech was so short because the photographer thought it was going to be way longer, so the photographer was still setting up when Lincoln finished, which is why the only picture of him at that address is of him leaving the stage.
Yeah, and I think, like, when photography was first invented, I think in like the 1830s or 20s or something. Like, at that point, it took like a substantial amount of time to take the picture. I don't know how much.
Yeah.
I don't know about, like, the 1860s or whatever, but maybe it was sort of still the same, where it takes, like, all right, you got to stand there for like 10 minutes to take the picture.
I think by the 1860s it was down to 30 seconds. But yeah, I guess my point with that was that, James, in this episode, presumably they're making it out like James makes an active effort to go out and be amongst the people enough so that a lot of people know what he looks like.
Yeah.
He's also been king since he was 1 and presumably ruling through regions, so maybe people were more interested in like the drama and spice of that than normal. I don't know. Just kind of spitballing here.
Yeah.
So interesting to think about, though. It's a good point. I didn't really think about that, so I'm glad you brought it up.
Speaking of famous people and celebrities, the Doctor mentions one of her famous people.
Yeah.
That's how I write it down now. Like in my notes, that's the section, Doctor's famous people.
I just write them in my outline now, as I do with my quotes, actually. I just write it all into the outline as soon as it comes up, so I don't have to bother with formatting, because I don't know why I do that now, actually. But yeah, she mentions Harry Houdini.
Yeah.
And she can mention James the First from now on, too.
And 6th.
Yeah. He's the same guy. But...
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Why is he James the First and 6th? Because he's like James the First of England and James or something.
It's James the Sixth of England, but then when he took over Scotland as well, I think it was, he got renumbered as James the First of England and Scotland.
Huh. Yeah, just interesting. Very hard to keep track of who's who and what's what.
Yeah, because now aren't there 2 James the Firsts?
I guess. Well, there's the original James the First of England, and then James the Sixth became James the First of England and Scotland, right? So why isn't it James the Sixth and First? Like, why would
his
I don't
Wikipedia
know.
page is labeled James the Sixth and First?
Oh, gotcha.
To avoid confusion, I guess, with James the First. I discovered Wikipedia keeps track of every week, like the most visited page, the most visited 10 pages of that week, and it's actually really interesting to look back at some of the weeks and see it correlate with like real world events. Like 2 weeks ago, or maybe 3 when this goes out, the most visited page was, what's his name, Soleimani, the general who Trump had killed. And it's interesting because they compile it for the whole year, too. Want to know what the most looked at page in 2019 was?
It takes you away, the Doctor episode. No.
You wish. Do you want to make a guess, or should I just tell you?
Just tell me.
Avengers Endgame.
Yeah, I would have never guessed that.
I think Freddie Mercury was number 6. It's interesting because they also tell you what day the page got the most views, and like the day the Freddie Mercury page got the most views was like the day Bohemian Rhapsody won a whole bunch of Oscars, and like the day Endgame got the most views was like the day it came out. So it's most of the top like 10 to 25 of last year were pop culture related things. Just saying. Anyway, quotes.
I had one, but now that I look back on it, I don't even remember why I wrote it down. I guess I just thought it was funny. It was King James saying, "I know everything about Satan."
You would, King James. Just doesn't the Bible like not or what's the word?
Satan's not in the Old Testament, if that's what you're
No.
talking about.
I was going to say, doesn't the Bible look down upon homosexuality? But anyway.
Yes. Yeah. It does. Explicitly.
It also looks down on tattoos.
What?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's a section in Leviticus that's like you shouldn't permanently mark your skin or something like that. Your skin should be pure or something. But everybody overlooks that one.
Yeah, because we're living by still, I mean, I joke about that, but actually a lot of people are still living like word for word, like what's written in the Bible is like what's good and right. Yeah.
Yeah. I wrote down one quote that I also just wrote down because it was funny. I already said my other one, which was serious, that we want certainty to know if people are good or evil. Well, actually, I also wrote down the Doctor's, if I was still a bloke, I could get down to fixing this instead of having to defend myself.
Yeah.
But I just wrote down Graham's kind of funny quote when he gets assigned Witchfinder General, and he says something like, "It's a very flat team structure. We all have equal contributions." And I was like, no, it's not. No, it's not. So, there you go.
Yeah.
I actually liked this episode. I don't think we mentioned if we liked this episode or not at any point during this recording, but I liked this episode.
This one was really good. This is one of my favorite. I mean, they can always come back. There's still 2 episodes left. They can always come back and just ruin everything, but
that's true.
This is one of my favorite seasons of New Who.
I think I'm going to have to agree with you. You know, rewatching these episodes, I'm enjoying these like a lot, actually.
Yeah.
Like a lot. And there's a lot to find here if you want to look for it, I should say, you know.
Yeah,
with the
I think so.
The doctor admitting she's wrong, and the everybody's not perfectly good or evil kind of thing. And I think that actually, you know, looking ahead, just as a little preview, comes back around not only next week, but in the Battle of Ransker Avkolas. So I think it's a really good season so far.
Just wait till the frog.
Can't wait for series 12. When we like every episode again and everyone's like, "What are you doing? Trust your doctor." No, trust your doctor. Stop.
Well, you know, just when you're going against the grain, or when you find that your opinion is against the grain, just remember that the newest season of Doctor Who is always the worst thing in recorded human history, and that everything else, no matter how bad it was and no matter how much you hated it at the time, was amazing.
Except for series
11. Still hated.
It is still hated, yes. I was going to say except for series, whichever was the one with the Day of the Moon and the Impossible Astronaut, because people really hated that season.
No, 8.
No, 8, 9, and 10 were all 12th Doctor. Impossible Astronaut, Day of the Moon was the 11th Doctor. I think it was 6.
Damn. Oh, I'm thinking of Kill the Moon.
I think it was 6. People really hated that season. And there's been a very slight revisionist history view of that season, but I'd say the reviews are now more mixed than they were before. Because like you said, the latest season of Doctor Who is always the worst thing you ever put to tape. Never mind the fact that we've watched things like Troll 2 and the Holiday Special and Neverending Story 3.
Check out Triple Play, a movie trilogy podcast.
Coming back soon, actually, for season 2. With the Fred trilogy. Anyway, if you would like to email us, you can reach us at thedoctor@decorativevegetable.com. Questions, comments, concerns, angry rants, love letters, your thoughts on It Takes You Away, because I wanted to know what you think about the frog before we record, because I want to talk about the frog. But also tell us about the Witchfinders. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify, all at Trust Your Doctor. You can find us on YouTube at Decorative Vegetable. We're shooting a rating if you like the show.
Check us out on Facebook, Trust Your Doctor. Like us on Facebook. Also check us out on Twitter at TYD Podcast, and follow us on Twitter. Next time we're watching It Takes You Away, but until then, the end.